Anybody who knows you, Nicole, will be putting in their diaries now, 20th of May for Nicole's birthday for next year.
I don't think I can get more red at this moment. Oh, you're so bad.
So we are at the top of the hour. We're going to kick off. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody that has. Happy International World Bee Day. We're delighted, absolutely delighted to be hosting this webinar today. And thank you so much to John Cox, Wally Blanner-Hassett and Nicole Cox, no relation to John. I'm saying that before you pointed out, Nicole, because I know you're always stringent about it. Doesn't get that separation there. But thank you so much for joining us today. Of all days, it's wonderful that we can kind of celebrate such a day with such an incredible webinar and so much information that's going to help everybody to help halt the decline of bees in Ireland. So just a quick little intro from me. I just wanted to update you all. As you're all on this call, you probably know a little bit about DCs for Bees. So DCs for Bees is a sub-initiative of Host in Ireland. It's something where when myself and Gary started working together, we were looking to do something bigger, something that we could get the industry behind in a way that was really meaningful outside our day jobs, outside our, our bits and bytes and bolts and, data centers and cabinets and racks and all the rest. And when we started to look at what we could do and where we could really make a difference, the one thing that came up again and again was bees. And bees are a massive indicator of biodiversity in general. So while we know our bees are in decline, that's also an indication that our 12,000 other species of insects are also in decline. So this is a critical area. Bees are our pollinators. They help to pollinate our crops. In fact, about 70% of the crops that are produced around the globe are pollinated by bees. And so really our survival depends on theirs. But the amazing thing is, and the thing that, I think gets to us all is, we hear all of these bad news stories and we get climate anxiety and it feels out of our control. This is in your control, which is the magic piece. I can do something in my back garden. I can do something in my local area that will actually make a difference, because this is all about taking action, being really aware of it, stopping some things, starting other things. And all of those differences that I make will make a difference in my little postage stamp of land that I have. But if everybody does the same thing, that has a massive, massive impact. And so today, this is about putting the power in your hands, about giving you the tools that you can use to make a change in your own environment. So that's what today is about. A little bit about DCs for Bees, just in terms of the overview. If anybody hasn't heard, our Pollinator Plan, which was an incredible launch on the 20th of May, on the 21st of May even, you can go and access that right now on our website. There's 42 actions. As an organization, you can sign up to it and commit and pledge to take action and make a real difference within your organization, with your employees, with your supply base, with your land. There's lots and lots of things, and it doesn't matter if you're a big data center provider or if you're the smallest consultant supplier into the industry, you can actually sign up to the Pollinator Plan. So have a look at that. We also have our ambassador program, where we've got 32 people who are representing our partner organizations and some friends of ours, and friends of the bees, not friends of ours, friends of the bees, who have joined us to make a real difference. And that is an amazing group who are sharing ideas, who are taking action, and who are trying to make as much of a difference as they possibly can. And then we have our difference days. So the difference days, we did this in quite a while ago now, actually. With the pandemic, we've only had the opportunity to do it once, but we did go and we planted 2,000 native trees over 8 acres on one day, and made a real viable difference to the landscape. Now, we have something really, really exciting coming up in about a month's time. And we would love everybody here to join us. We will be doing a webinar on the 16th of June, and we will be launching one of the most incredible projects around biodiversity and certainly within the industry. So come and join us on the 16th of June, where we're going to be launching our Orchards in the Community project. There will be a link in the chat. Keep an eye out there, and we'll reveal more on the 16th of June, where you can find out all about it. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before I hand over. You'll see at the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A. The Q&A is for questions for the gang here. Type in your question. What you can do is, as you see questions coming up, you can actually upvote questions that you want to be prioritized. So take the opportunity, rather than typing in another question, upvote existing questions. Okay, so just to kind of keep it really easy for us, we tend to get loads and loads and loads of questions. So keep it as easy for us as possible, so that we'll be able to, we're not reading through the same questions, and we can pinpoint those questions that you guys really want answered. And so I'm going to hand over to Nicole, John and Wally. After that, we're going to do our Q&A. And then finally, I'm going to invite back Gary just to close things up. So over to you guys.
So thank you, Michelle, for that great introduction. Good afternoon and welcome to our Host in Ireland presentation, Be the Difference. Just as a backup to Michelle's introduction, over the next half hour or so, we plan to talk to you about our pollinators, tell you a little bit about what they do for us and the trouble they're in and why that is so important. We will hopefully lead you through some of the steps that we can take to fix the problem and point you at the best places to find all the information you'll need. The problem our pollinators face is a major global problem. Unfortunately, when most of us hear major global problem, we feel pretty helpless and tend to switch off. If you take only one message from today, as Michelle said, we can all do something that will help, that will make a difference. And this is true whether you have a window box or you live on a farm or are lucky enough to be living on a big estate somewhere. No matter where you are, what your resources are, you can do something that will make a difference. Many things that we discuss are very easy to do and often mean do nothing at all. With many issues, it is often not the big gesture, but small actions from many people that make a difference. And an analogy I often like to use is with our honeybees. One bee in its lifetime produces just 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. One beehive in a season can produce 60 pounds of honey. Little actions by many, when joined together, can have huge results. So if we all do something small, the results can be enormous. So let's introduce the panel. I'm Wally Blenner-Hassett, and I have worked in the comms and data center industry for over 40 years, where I first became associated with Host in Ireland. However, I've always been a lover of the outdoors, everything from hill walking to caving to water sports. And hence, I have a real interest in nature and our environment. The picture above on the left combines two of my interests, beekeeping and golf. I happen to keep some of my bees on a golf course. Over to you, John.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining our webinar today. My name is Nicole Cox. I'm Dcs For Bees Ambassador on behalf of Ethos Engineering. I've been a beekeeper for over 30 years now and have a very keen interest in bees since I was a child. I'm also very passionate about the whole subject of biodiversity, flora and fauna. I'm a keen gardener. Try to keep my garden as bee and pollinator friendly as possible. I also have a number of bird boxes, etc., installed in my garden, and a number of residents are in there at the moment now, rearing their brood. I'll now hand you over to Nicole.
Thanks, John. I'm Nicole Cox. I'm no relation, but I'm a volunteer beekeeper from the States originally. I moved to Dublin in June of last year and have been involved with Siemens Limited and a Dcs For Bees ambassador on behalf of them. When I moved here, of course, during the lockdown, there wasn't as much time to get involved with the native Irish honeybee, but it also gave more time to familiarize myself with the 98 other species of wild bumblebees and solitary bees. So there are a wealth of resources that I was able to use to familiarize myself with them, and always learning, but also really appreciative of the community here, which seems to have a great passion for pollinators. So with that, we can go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about them. Thanks.
So if we talk about bees, most people feel they know what we're talking about. We've honeybees and we've got bumblebees. It might surprise some of you to hear that while we have one species of honeybee, we have 21 different types of bumblebee. In addition, we have 77 different types of solitary bee. So next time you hear a bee buzzing around, remember it could be any one of 99 different bee types. Honeybees are to some extent managed by beekeepers, and we try to do things like making sure they've secure places to live, their hives, enough to eat. However, bumblebees and solitary bees are wild pollinators, very much fend for themselves. Anything we can do to help any type of bee, be it solitary, bumblebee, or honeybee, in general will help all of them. You know, providing food and so on, it helps them all. So if we do, anything we do will help. If we go to the next slide, let me talk about the honeybee and what makes our bees so important. We all know that honeybees provide honey and the many benefits that can bring. But much more importantly, and as Michelle said in the introduction, all of our bees are very efficient at pollinating our crops and plants. It's estimated that they pollinate 70% of our crops. If you consider that a single, in a honeybee hive, you could have 60,000 bees. So you can imagine as they gather their food and go from plant to plant, they can spread around an awful lot of pollen and pollinate the different plants. The annual value of pollinators to our economy in Ireland is estimated to be at least 59 million. A little bit on the makeup of and how bees work. Honey and bumblebees live in colonies made up of one queen who lays all the eggs, the workers, and the drones. Probably no surprise to at least half of you out there, all the worker bees are female. They raise the young, gather the food, clean the hive, and in general do all the work. Male bees are called drones, and their only incredibly demanding purpose in life is to mate with the queen. With that, hand over to, go to the next slide and over to Nicole.
Thanks very much. When we're talking about the native Irish bumblebee, we have 21 species, as Wally said. 6 of those are currently threatened with extinction, and an additional 3 of them are near threatened. Like the honeybees, the bumblebees are social insects, which means that they live in colonies with a queen, female workers, and some males as well. As with all bees, only the females are the ones that sting, and the female bumblebees can sting more than once, but they're not at all aggressive. Generally, when you see them out, they're more interested in food than they are in you. So in general, just give them their space and you won't have anything to worry about at all. Of the 21 species of the bumblebee, there are 6 cuckoo bees as well, which are kleptoparasites and my personal favorites. They steal food and resources that have already been procured by other bees. They don't make their own nests either. They would lay their eggs in the nests of a true bumblebee, and they would be inadvertently raising the young of the cuckoo bees on their behalf. As well, anyone who's familiar with Harry Potter might be happy to learn that Dumbledore is actually the Old English term for bumblebee. With that, we can go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about what the bees need. Thanks. So in the spring, the bumblebee is the queen is going to be emerging from her hibernation. Throughout the season, the bumblebees have an incredible need for vast amounts of food. So the queen may visit up to 6,000 flowers a day just to get sufficient nectar to be able to brood or lay her eggs. Once she is laying the eggs and they hatch, then there's going to be a requirement for even more food to be able to feed the colony. In the autumn and the winter, however, all of the bumblebees outside of the queen will pass away. And so then the queen goes into hibernation once more. So in order for her to hibernate, there again, she's going to need a huge amount of food to be able to keep her fat levels up and to be able to survive the winter and then emerge in the spring to start the process all over again. You can go to the next slide. On to you, John.
Okay, so solitary bees, we have 77 different types of solitary bees in Ireland. The solitary bees have often been described as the unsung heroes in regard to pollination. They do an amazing amount of work. However, because they are solitary, we're not often very aware that they're around. They're in every garden. They nest in different places. And by definition, being solitary, they don't have massive colonies, the same as our honeybees, who live in hives and are commercially managed by beekeepers. Next slide, please. So where do solitary bees nest? Well, so we have 62 types of mining bees. Mining bees nest in sandbanks, in clay banks, in peat, anywhere where they can burrow in. Sometimes you might see a little mound of earth at the entrance to their nest site. And then also we have 15 types of cavity nesting bees. These guys nest in holes in fence posts, in brickwork, dry stone walls, in commercially made bee nests, anywhere basically where there's a little place that you can get in and rear their brood. You can help these guys by providing nesting habitat for them in the form, if you drill holes into tree stumps or poles, etc., leave blocks around their garden, cavity blocks where they get into any dry stone walls. Next slide, please.
So thank you, John. So that's a bit of a background on different types and vast different number of different types of bees that we have. Now the bad news. Bees, I guess, in Ireland have been monitored since 1980. And since then, more than half of our 99 different species have undergone huge declines in their numbers. In fact, 1/3 of our different bee species are threatened with extinction. 2 species have already become extinct, so not there anymore. If we remember how important our bees are as pollinators, you can imagine how serious this is. So next slide, please. So why is this happening? Why are our pollinators declining? And we've already alluded, I think, to some of the reasons. But their habitats are disappearing. The places where wild bees live are going. As we continue, I suppose, to cover the planet with concrete, more roads, more buildings, as we farm in more intensive ways, manicure our parks and our green spaces, and our gardens, their habitat, the places they live, are disappearing. These are the same places that the food that they depend on is grown. Bees need food throughout the whole season. So it's important that we have a range of plants that bloom at different times when the bees need them. Different diseases are attacking bees. Probably the most or best well known of them would be the Varroa Mite, which has spread from the continent and has decimated many honeybee hives across the country. The use of pesticides. Pesticides kill insects. Bees are insects. No surprise, pesticides kill bees. So anything we can do to reduce the use of pesticides will help the bees. Another global problem, climate change, affects everything, including our bees. Flowers blooming at different times out of season may not be at the time that bees need that food. So that's also affecting our pollinators. So all these things add up and are causing the decline of our pollinators. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Wally. When we're looking at ways that we can help the bees, it's important to keep in mind that their needs are not going to be different from our own. They need security, food, and shelter. Food is important throughout the year, but particularly important between the spring and autumn. And the next few slides, we're going to be taking you through some of the resources that are available through the DC for Bees and Host Ireland Pollinator Plan, the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, and some resources for gardening for biodiversity as well. In terms of shelter, there are things that we can all do, from growing out the hedgerows to limiting pesticides, as Wally mentioned, and really starts by changing our priorities and trying to get away from the mentality that it has to be perfect to be beautiful, because so often when you see these wild meadows now, and they're everywhere, especially this season, it is so much nicer to look at and more beneficial to the pollinators than looking at a perfectly manicured lawn. And so just changing that mindset from the start can be incredibly helpful. And as I said as well, just eliminating pesticides is really number one. So if we can all do our part there, we really will make a difference. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of the areas we can influence, over the next few slides, we're going to be showing you the different areas that you personally can get involved in your homes, your gardens, your sport areas, and even your community spaces. We're going to be talking about things that we can each do and getting away from those unintended consequences. For instance, when you look at ways to plant native Irish flowers, you might think that you can go for any bee balm, but if it's imported, there's going to be more of a risk, and indeed it could even be imported from a place that has different pesticide regulations than Ireland does. So it's very important to shop local and to do some research before you purchase to make sure that what you're buying is going to give the best safety and security, but it's also going to be the most beneficial for the native species, that we're not introducing flowers that aren't helpful or known to them. We can go to the next slide, please.
Okay, so what can we do then to help our bees and our pollinators in our community areas? Support your local beekeepers. Beekeepers put a lot of time and effort into having viable and good quality honey from their apiaries. Local source honey is always far better than the commercially bought stuff insofar as that it's pure. What you can buy in supermarkets for €1 or €1.50 a bottle is not pure honey. It's often manufactured from artificial sweeteners. Lobby your resident associations. Try and get them to plant bee-friendly and pollinator-friendly plants in the area. Get the children involved as well. Children are now very, very aware of the importance of our bees and our pollinators and to our food production. So get them involved in the early stage. Get them interested. Lobby your county councillors and your politicians. These guys are obviously, involved in your local area. They have their finger on the pulse, and in most cases, they are very, very interested in the whole pollination process and trying to improve our biodiversity. And volunteer in your local groups. Do tidy ups in the local area, plant flowers if you can. Do anything you can help to help our pollinators. Every little bit helps. Next slide, please.
So thank you, John. So many of us are members of different sporting organizations. And as members, we can influence the decisions taken by those clubs. If we consider, I suppose, a typical sports ground, there are often areas we can look at. While the pitch itself, if it has a pitch, is probably needs to be prepared in a particular way. So think of other things that can be done. The surrounds of the pitch and clubhouse, any hedgerows, flower beds, other unused areas. As John was saying earlier, plant wildflowers in these unused areas, or just let them grow wild. wild, untouched areas provide a habitat and food for our pollinators. It's really, I suppose, a mindset that it's a wild-looking area, but it is so important. Again, as Nicole said earlier, reducing pesticides is one of the main things. So try and encourage whoever looks after the grounds to reduce the use of pesticides. Use them in spot areas if absolutely necessary, but really try and eliminate them. A tip, I think, for everything from gardens to sports grounds, keep a list of plants that are pollinator friendly. And you'll get those lists in some of the aids we talk about later, but keep those lists handy. And whenever you go to buy to purchase plants in garden centres and things, select something from that list. And it really brings areas alive if they're buzzing and alive with pollinators. So if we go to the next slide, please. This is, I suppose, a small case study of a golf course that our golf club I'm actually a member of, and I do keep some bees on it. But I think in general, when people think of golf courses, they think of manicured fairways, perfectly prepared greens. I'm very happy to be associated with a club that works hard to supply everything a golfer needs, but still supports the pollinators. And if you see in this picture, for instance, you can see a fairway off in the distance, but in the foreground, there's an area that's been left to grow wild. And in some areas, they've just been left to grow, and they're cut a couple of times a year, but in general, they're left to grow wild. And in other areas, wildflower seeds have been planted. So this is an example of where you can have, the requirements of the golfers accommodated for, and also the requirements of the pollinators supported. So there's no conflict between the two. The two work very well together. If we go to the next slide, it's just a couple of other photographs. Again, you can see closely mown grass on the big picture on the right beside an area of wildflowers. The picture on the left shows just over the bunker is some, you could say rubbish, but it's logs and clay stacked to provide a habitat for the wild bees, the solitary bees to nest. So you can see there's lots of ways that you can have wild areas in places that traditionally would have been all manicured and kept very well. So the golfers are happy, and hopefully we believe the pollinators have certainly come back. And I've seen, not just the bees, but we've now got lots of butterflies in the area. I've seen ladybirds on the place that I haven't seen before. So, anything we do, and I think this goes back to something Michelle said earlier, anything we do to help the bees helps other wildlife and other pollinators as well. So on to the next slide.
Thanks, Molly. Next, we're going to take a look at another case study. This is an office park, a sustainability garden that was built in Glasnevin. And as you can see, they did a gorgeous job. You have a variety of native species of wildflower that are growing there. You have an insect hotel that you can see in the bottom right corner. But then as well, they've done a great job of really leaving the space, to grow on its own. Because so often we get this in our heads that it needs to be tampered with, it needs constant activity. And as you can see here, so much of it is just nature growing on its own, doing what it will. And it's a beautiful sight as well, a very pleasing area to walk through on a break. You can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. Now, if you don't have that kind of space available, of course, there are other options for starting smaller. And in many ways, it's the better option because it gives you time to familiarize yourself with the variety of different plants you might not have worked with, gives you a chance to invest more so in the plants that you're comfortable with or that you think are beautiful and that you want to learn to work with. So when you start small, you don't have to have a large investment. You can just have a few seeds that you're growing in a windowsill and a few plants and build up from there. And it's better to do so that way rather than to make a huge garden area for plants you're not familiar with, don't have experience working with, or you don't have the time to take care of if it's a more high maintenance plant. So oftentimes a window box is a great way to get children involved and to be able to brighten up the space in your community as well if it's on the exterior walls. As you can see here, there are a number of resources available. The one we recommend is the Garden Actions for the All Ireland Plan. There's also a 2021 to 2025 update to that. So we'll include the links to all of these resources, and the Dcs For Bees, the Dcs For Bees Pollinator Plan as well has a lot of resources for helping you understand which type of plants to grow, to plant at what time of the day and what time of the year. We can go to the next slide, please.
Okay, so what can you do in your home garden? Well, majority of home gardens have some form of lawn, so cut as normal, but not before April, if at all possible. The reason we ask people not to cut before April, because April is a very lean time for bees. There's not a lot of flowers around, not a lot of nectar, not a lot of food. So in April, you have the dandelion coming out, you have the daisies, you have all those other nice little wildflowers that come out and about. So if you can all leave them there, please. They are of major benefit to the bees and pollinators. You may have noticed this year along our motorways there's been an explosion of colour in the form of dandelions. This is a major food source, as we mentioned earlier, for our bees, so it's great to see that happening. The next thing you can do is set aside areas for wildflowers. If at all possible, leave your borders uncut, leave little areas for wildflowers such as nettles, etc. The wildflowers, once again, a major food source for our pollinators and bees. And apart from that, they actually do look very beautiful and pretty and help your garden. Next thing you do is stop using pesticides. Sadly, in all our big garden stores, you go in, you see shelves and shelves and shelves of all sorts of pesticides, insecticides, etc. It's a massive business. However, it is decimating our bees and pollinators. So if at all possible, stop using them. If you do have to use them very sparingly. When planting, use pollinator-friendly plants. Believe it or not all flowers are pollinator friendly, and some of the prettier, more colorful ones are not, such as daffodils, tulips, etc. The flowers that are really good for bees are anything that's blue or purple. They love that color. Small plants like lavender, herb gardens, any fruit plants, fruit-bearing plants like apples, pears, plums, etc. Very beneficial to our bees. Also use locally sourced seeds and bee bombs. Not a lot of the commercially purchased bee bombs come or contain seeds that are native to Ireland. So we don't import anything nasty, any diseases, anything that's not native to Ireland. So use homegrown if at all possible. And start small. Start small and work your way up. Every little bit we do can help. Next, please. So if we look at this slide here, this is a typical small suburban garden where the homeowner has gone to an awful lot of bother to try and make the garden as bee and pollinator friendly as possible. Planted some very good pollinator plants like heather, cosmos, fuchsia, lavender, campula. They've also allowed a couple of little wild areas there along the garden border, along the shed, etc. And they have a little dry stone wall there, which is a benefit to some of our sultry bees who like to build their nests and homes in there. Next slide.
So we've mentioned there are many aids to help you, and the good news is that I think anybody that registered for this webinar will receive a mail that will point you or give you links to these resources. But if you start at the Host in Ireland website and go to the DC for Bees sections, you can find lots of information. Can I also suggest, as Nicole mentioned earlier, the All Ireland Pollinator Plan? If you go to their webpage, you'll find really good information and dedicated sections for everything from working on small gardens to working on large farms and everything in between. including window boxes. They've produced a series of guidelines on how you can provide food, shelter, and safety for our pollinators. And all their actions are evidence-based with lots of research have gone into it. So they really, really useful information. And next slide and over to Nicole, I think.
Thanks, Wally. And again, there's such a wealth of resources available. These are just a few that we used and would highly recommend. You have the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, the Dcs For Bees Pollinator Plan. And then as well, there are two that have been incredibly helpful for me personally, and I think would be beneficial to anyone who might be new to pollinators in Ireland or just more interested in learning about biodiversity. The first is the Gardening for Biodiversity pamphlet. There's also a YouTube series. I believe County Laois has put all of this together, and it's just an incredible resource. And then as well, Nature on Our Doorsteps, which was published by the South Dublin County Council. They have a lot of local information and tips for maintaining and understanding and identifying the local flora and fauna. We can go to the next slide, please.
And finally, the famous Albert Einstein once commented that if the bee disappears from the surface of the earth, mankind will have no more than 4 years to live. This is a very, very worrying thought. Even in his time, he was very aware of the importance of our pollinators and food production. So you would take one thing out of this webinar today. I'd like you all to remember that if we all do something small, the results can be enormous. On behalf of my two co-presenters, Nicole and Wally, I'd like to thank you all for taking part in the webinar. I hope you found it interesting and informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Do you know what? This is the fourth time I've heard this presentation, and every time I hear it, I learn something new. That was incredible. Thank you so much. We've loads of questions coming in. So if anybody does want to ask any more questions, pop there onto the Q&A at the bottom, and we'll certainly get to those in just a moment. Just for the live listeners, if anybody is there, just to know, I think John, you had mentioned it there a little while, or Wally mentioned it. I think if you go to anybody who's live, obviously isn't registered on our list or may not be registered on our list. So if you do want to find out more about DCs for Bees in the future and sign up to our list, if you just Google DCs for Bees, you'll get to the DCs for Bees page on our website, scroll down to the bottom and sign up. So if you do want to register so that you're getting the updates. So I'll just mention that. Something I found so interesting there, 59 million worth, that's the worth of pollinators just in Ireland alone. How incredible is that? I think sometimes when the real reason, we all depend on this and we need biodiversity for survival, but sometimes money talks, and it's amazing how we can quantify that. So I love that we can put a figure on that. And something else there, like talk about the hardest workers, that bumblebees are visiting 6,000 flowers a day. So when you think about the odd dandelion popping up in your grass, we need several. We need those thousands and thousands of them popping up all over the roundabouts and all over our gardens. And and Nicole, you made a lovely point there about about flowers and beauty and that kind of perception of what we think is beautiful. And it is that kind of mindset change that we need to do. Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Now we have loads of questions. So I'm going to start doing a rapid fire round of questions for you. Peter, there will be a recording available, has asked that. So we'll knock that one off the list for now. So question from one of our LinkedIn Live visitors. Any tips or resources to help kids understand that they don't need to be afraid of bees? Would love to support our local bees, just need to get the kids on board with it too. I've heard parents say this too, that they'd love to, be more involved with bees, but they're kind of afraid their kids will get stung. Anybody have any tips to help the kids and their parents along?
Well, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that bees generally, or certainly the honeybees generally, if they sting you, they're going to die. You know, so they don't really want to sting us. Generally, they're only going to do something like sting us if they feel threatened. And I think as we get more comfortable, and our kids, more importantly, get comfortable with having bees around and having them in the garden, you know, you're not waving at them and trying to swat them away all the time. And that's when they sting you. So the more comfortable people are with bees, the less chance you have of getting stung. So, so the more bees around, and I suppose just explaining to kids what bees are, that they don't really want to sting you, all these things I think can help. The problem is, I guess, you know, there's still chances of getting stung, and it's hard. If kids are nervous, it's hard to convince them that, you know, you can let a bee walk in your hand. It's not going to sting you unless it feels you're going to try and do something to it. I don't know, has anybody else got anything to add?
I think if we can also impress upon our children how important a role that bees play in food production, etc., and there's nothing to be worried about. They're amazing little workers. I used to try to explain to some children there recently about how long it takes them to make honey. And an analogy is often used out of a food source is a kilometre from a beehive. The bees collectively will fly about 30,000 kilometres to make a half a kilo of honey. I mean, that's an amazing fact. You know, you have these guys literally buzzing all over the place, going about their work, and they work from dawn till dusk, 7 days a week. Amazing little creatures.
Brilliant.
And as well, for anyone that's looking for maybe a pamphlet or something like that, I did a quick check, and pollinators.ie does have a junior version of the Pollinator Plan made specifically for children. It's also available as Gaelic, so you have a lot of different resources there. It would be at pollinators.ie/schools. And it looks like there's a lot of effort that's been put into that exact question.
Brilliant. Sounds like education is key with, you know, as with a lot of these things.
So true.
Another question from LinkedIn Live from Tara. There have been very few bees in the garden this spring. Is this because it's been colder than normal this year, and should we be worried?
Well, yeah, I mean, bees will only fly when the temperature gets up a little bit. So there are less bees around when it's colder, certainly. Should we be worried? And I think, you know, well, I guess one of the reasons we're having this seminar is that we are all worried. And, you know, but I think there is reasons for hope as well. I mean, John mentioned earlier the dandelions we have everywhere. You know, the number of bees. I know, looking in my garden, I've seen more bumblebees in the last few weeks than I have seen, you know, for a long time. And solitary bees, I begin to see, and I'm probably looking for them more now since we started this, but I'm certainly seeing more of them now. I think things are getting better, but we have a long way to go. I think it's a long road, and I think as John said so well, if we all do something small to help, the results can be enormous.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for that. So just Laura McAllister, you've got a question about a specific graphic that can be used on LinkedIn to celebrate World Bee Day and support the Pollinator Plan. Bear with us. Our busy bees are working in the background getting that ready right this minute. So bear with us. You will see it on our LinkedIn page. We'll post it up after this. So we'll have it available there. If we, I'm not quite sure if we can get it into the chat here, but we will get it up there on LinkedIn. So keep an eye out on that. Thank you for the question, and delighted that you're available and willing to support as well. It's brilliant. Sorry now. Loads of great comments about it's a wonderful, fantastic, guys. Thank you, very interesting. So let me see. Now here's a little bit of a technical question. I don't know if you have the question. Is the sting from a bee the same as a wasp? My husband is allergic to a wasp sting. So Dr. Nicole, if you could answer that.
Doctor being the question there. Yeah, I think that would be worth doing an allergy test with the GP and just confirming, because although there might be a differentiation, I'm not entirely sure. I can say as well that if you have one, it wouldn't necessarily mean you're not allergic to the other. So definitely worth doing the test or just talking to your GP.
Just on that one, Nicole, I know from a friend of mine who is very sensitive to bee stings. He carries an EpiPen with him. I was only had a discussion with him the other day there. Bee venom and wasp venom are totally different. People who get allergic to bee stings are not allergic, most cases, to wasp stings. Just an interesting fact.
Fantastic. I should have let you answer first.
Good to know. What I might just add there as well is, to all our audience, we are definitely not medical experts. So we are enthusiastic amateurs. And, you know, we're here to spread as much awareness as we possibly can, but just be aware to go, and is particularly for anything like that, to Nicole's point, to get
Can I ask a question, Michelle?
Oh, I don't know. It depends what it is, Gary.
Well, I always think the bee is a bit like the great white shark. It has a far worse reputation than actually what it does in our universe. The little tsetse fly is of the 88 or 99 bees that we have in Ireland, how many of them actually sting? Wally, John, Nicole.
This is where we say, Gary, you're not allowed to ask questions.
Tune in next time.
Right, Gary should be on mute.
Listen, I don't actually know the answer to how many. One of the interesting things as well, though, that we didn't mention, I suppose, is that when we're talking about wasps and bees, wasps can sting as often as they like in general, whereas bees, if they sting you, they're going to leave their sting in your skin. So just the recommendation is to scratch it away with a fingernail. And that's why they die. So the difference, I guess, between bees and wasps, one of the key ones, is that the bee leaves their sting behind, which kills them. The wasps can sting again and again. Of all the different bees, you know, generally, I think, as Nicole said earlier, the bumblebees, whereas the females can sting, they generally don't at all. They very seldom, I think, feel threatened. And in general, in fact, I don't know anybody who's been stung by a bumblebee. But I'm not sure how many bees, to answer Gary's question, can sting.
There's always one.
There's always one, isn't there? I've a few more questions here. We'll take a couple more, and there's some lovely comments there as well in the questions if anybody does want to have a look. But Owen Lamkin has a question here. Any progress being made in dealing with now I won't pronounce this right, the Varroa Mite problem?
I'll take that one, Michelle. Yeah, the Varroa Mite has been very detrimental to the bee population in Ireland. Quite frankly, the wild bee is nearly extinct now. The wild honeybee, that is, nearly extinct because of the Varroa. They've decimated bee colonies both in Ireland and worldwide. There is a lot of interest at the moment in trying to breed a Varroa-resistant bee, which will be able to fend off the attack from the Varroa Mite. The Varroa is a little parasitic bug that basically lives on the back of the bee and will decimate the bee colonies. If not treated. The beekeepers do treat them annually to try and eliminate them and keep them under control. So yeah, to be honest with you, there's a lot of interest and scientific interest in trying to resolve this issue, because clearly it's a worldwide concern.
Great stuff. Thank you. We touched on this a little bit earlier on, but a question here about, are wasps a type of bee? Nicole, I know you answered that in the written section there, but if you want to share it with the rest of the group.
Yeah, sure. So they would have evolved from wasps. Bees would be related very, very far back. They are technically different species now, however. But it is also important to keep in mind that when we're adjusting our perspectives to be pollinator friendly, wasps are also pollinators. I'm sorry to tell you, they're important.
They are really important. I love this. Una Fitzpatrick from the National Biodiversity Data Centre tells this amazing story about wasps, and she puts it into perspective, I think, in a brilliant way. So wasps at the start of the season, you've got the worker wasps, and their job is to go off, kill small little pests in your garden. So the ones that would be, feeding on your plants and flowers, right? So they're doing you a favor. They're killing all those little pests. They're bringing them back to the nest. They're feeding those little pests to the baby wasps. And then they're licking all the kind of sticky substance that the baby wasps excrete. So the wasps are happy. The wasps are actually all around us right now. Not all around us, you know what I mean? But they're not bothering us, right? Because they have a job to do. They're getting fed. They're all very happy. They're fully employed. What happens is there's 3 rounds of that. And at the end of the season, as the babies mature, and basically the wasps become unemployed. They have nothing to do anymore because they don't have to feed the babies. And also the babies aren't excreting this sticky substance that feeds them. So at the end of the season, around about late August, when they kind of start to get a bit annoying, the wasps are actually a little bit drunk because they're feeding on fermenting fruit and that kind of thing. They are unemployed. They've got nothing to do, and basically they just start hanging around bins and people and being quite annoying then and trying to rob your food. So for 90% of the season, we don't even notice wasps, and they're actually doing a brilliant job for pollination and for pest control in your garden. There's my little story that I wrote. So I think we've got time for another question. This is kind of a related one. Yeah. I just want to know if bees and wasps can be in the garden harmoniously. I know we had a wasp nest in our eaves and we have let it alone. Well done.
I'll take that one, Michelle. Yeah, they do cohabit. There's no doubt, or coexist, I should say, but you will often see the wasps trying to get into the beehive to get some free honey. The bees have a defensive strategy where they have what they call guard bees at the entrance to the hive, so they drive the wasps off. So yes, they can coexist, but they wouldn't be the best of friends, let's say, because the wasp was looking for a free meal and the bees aren't too happy in giving one away.
Great stuff. Thank you. And we'll go for another question. Teresa Connolly is asking, can you please explain what a bee balm is?
I was just typing up a response to that, so I can do a quick one.
Yeah.
The bee balm is a seed ball. So oftentimes it would have clay or other nutrients in it. And the idea is that rather than with some seeds that you would need to dig space for them, once the ground is cleared and you have some bee balms handy, you can just kind of distribute them pretty generously, and you would be able to get some gorgeous wildflowers. And the recommendation that we had to source them locally is just, again, to make sure that you're not getting seeds that were taken from a country that may have different rules on pesticide. They might have been collected from a space that has pesticides. And then as well, that you're not bringing in foreign plants, that you would have the native plants being grown there. Wally, John, anything to add?
Yeah, I just follow up because just something I heard on the radio yesterday. There's concern at the moment that wild, non-native wild flower seeds coming into the country containing what's called, I think, black grass. And this black grass is very invasive. It's not native to Ireland and is an incredible problem for our crops. So, talking about unintended consequences of things like using something, and I know, Nicole, you've always been very strong on not using native, making sure you use native seed whenever you're planting wildflowers. This is an issue where, plants that would not normally be in Ireland and not normally be here causing problems have been introduced through people trying to do the right thing, which is terribly unfortunate. So just to emphasize that, use native seeds and make sure you're getting them from the right place, or just let things grow wild.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and with that, we have come to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much to you all. I've certainly learned a lot, and I always find it enthralling when we have this conversation. So, Gary, to finish things up, I'd like to hand over to you. Just before I do, I just want to remind everybody again about the event that we're going to be holding on the 16th of June. We have such an exciting announcement to make around orchards. So join us. It's going to be mind-blowing. Can't wait. So see you then on the 16th of June.
So Nicole, Wally, John and Michelle, what a great show again. And I use the word show because it's a bit like a coordinated play where you have to be so coordinated in your words and you don't want to double up on each other. So very well done. You are ambassadors of the DCs for Bees. You are volunteers. You are doing this because you want to, not because you have to. And these are all the ethics of what we're trying to build in Ulster, Ireland, and indeed DCs for Bees. So thank you so much for your time. 2 years ago it is now since Michelle and I think Lisa, we went down to see the people who are the experts in this space, which is the National Biodiversity Centre in Waterford. And we were all gung-ho. We were full of everything. We were going to go out and we were going to stop everybody doing loads of things and do loads of things. And Una said to me, which was very profound, she said, well, actually, if you just stop doing certain things, you probably have a more effect than trying to force and do other things. And it was quite profound. And it was simple things. Don't cut your grass as often. The lady said there in the questions, let that wall fall down. Let the trees and the woods and the branches just lie on the ground because they're natural habitats, right? Wally said it there, he stole it from me. It's often the unintended consequences of trying to be a do-gooder and trying to do the thing that nature does naturally for us. That was the thing that I took away. And the other thing is, this is not inevitable. It's absolutely not inevitable that 33% of the 98 bees in Ireland will go extinct. How do we know that? Because I was brought up in the 80s when I was born in the 60s, sorry, I won't steal 20 years, but I was starting to listen in the 80s. And I was told that the panda would be extinct. The white horned rhino will be extinct, and we were all going to be vaporized by the ozone. Guess what? It didn't happen. We took action. We did stuff. The ozone is closed, and the panda and the other lad, the rhino, are on recovery, and they're not in the highly protected space. Yesterday, I don't know if any of you tapped in, but there was the Dublin Dialogue sessions, which was all notaries from all over the world gathered online in Dublin. And I listened to about the first hour, and I just couldn't take any more politicians and people talking until I got to Mary Robinson. And she said something, actually, and it's the only thing I can remember now. And she said, this climate challenge, including biodiversity, is way too important to leave it to politicians to sort out. I thought it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Because it's actually what we're doing here. Michelle said it. We're really enthusiastic beginners, amateurs, but we can make a difference. In terms of where we are, we've published the 43-point pollinator plan. It's not just for the DC industry. There's a few points in there that are, if you've got a campus and you're building a data center, then do like what Equinix are doing, or Keppel are doing, or Cyrus One, and dedicate it all to all sorts of swamps and ponds and growing vines. But more importantly, take 1 point. Don't cut your grass. Get a window box. Anything like that. It all adds up. It's like the butterfly effect. And finally, thank you so much to you for joining. We're at the stage now where advocacy and awareness is probably in the past. We know we've a challenge. We know we've got issues. It's now about the third and most important A, action. So if there's anything you do today, it should be action. Tell someone else that can take action, but let's not talk about it and then say, oh, I wish I had known. So thank you so much, panelists, Michelle, the most important people that you can't see. Come on in, Mira, Lisa, show yourself, because they've been doing all the magic in the background while we've been all here pretending we know what we're talking about. Show yourself. Come on.
And
There's
Sarah,
Lisa. Oh, Sarah, sorry. And Mira, thank you so much. Have a great day. And thank you again. Be good.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks a
thanks
lot.
everyone.
Bye.
Lovely comments there as well in the Q&A. Thanks everyone.